My phone died face down on my kitchen table after the 57th missed call. Rain tapped the windows of my Willamette Valley home, and the silence that followed should have felt peaceful. It felt like the eye of a hurricane. Then the doorbell rang 3 times, and a voice I'd known since it could barely speak cracked through my front door. "Dad? Please, I know you're in there." My son, the same son who, 2 hours earlier, had told me I had no place at his wedding. My name is Warren Calloway. I'm 62, and I've learned that the people who can shatter your heart fastest are the ones you spend a lifetime trying to protect. That morning had started like any other. Coffee on the back porch, fog drifting over the vineyards I'd built from nothing. My wife, Claire, used to say the vines looked like green waves frozen in time. She'd been gone 22 years. Cancer doesn't care how good a person you are, or whether a little boy still needs his mother. After she died, my whole world became Nathan. Every recital, every scraped knee, every promotion I turned down so I could coach Little League. I never regretted a single sacrifice. Not until that morning. I called Nathan to ask what time to arrive for the wedding. There was a silence on the line I didn't recognize, heavier than the comfortable kind we'd shared on fishing trips. Then he said it. "Dad, I don't think you should come to the wedding." I laughed, because it seemed impossible. He said it was complicated. I told him it wasn't. Finally, he admitted the truth. Vanessa didn't want me there. She thought I'd embarrass people. I looked out over the vineyards I'd spent decades building, the same ones that had paid for every opportunity my son ever had, and asked him plainly whether this was Vanessa talking or him. He didn't answer. Silence tells the truth. Words try to hide. 1 week earlier, I'd stood with Nathan and Vanessa under the oak trees on a hillside and handed them the deed to a $7.9 million vineyard, a wedding gift. No strings, just a place to build a family. Vanessa had wept and called it unbelievable. Nathan hugged me tighter than he had since he was a teenager. 7 days later, I wasn't fit to sit in the front row of their wedding. I told him I hoped he had a beautiful wedding, and I meant it. Then I hung up. No shouting, no accusations. I set the phone down and walked into my study, where 35 years of photographs lined the wall. Nathan on his first bike, his graduation, our camping trips to Crater Lake. I sat with those memories for almost 2 hours before the phone started buzzing without stopping. By the time it died, it showed 57 missed calls. Then the doorbell rang. It wasn't Nathan on my porch. It was my attorney, Audra Kenmore, who'd handled my affairs for 25 years. One look at her face told me this had already gone further than a phone call. She told me Nathan had called her office. So had Vanessa's father, sounding desperate, she said. That word caught me. 2 hours earlier I'd been an embarrassment. Now, suddenly, people were desperate. She opened a folder and slid an email across my table. Vanessa had meant to send it to a bridesmaid but accidentally copied half the wedding party, including an attorney still on the vineyard's paperwork chain. I read it once, then twice, hoping I'd misunderstood. Can you believe Warren actually thought he'd sit in the front row? He'd ruin the atmosphere. Dresses like he still owns a ranch, tells the same tired stories. Nathan agrees it's better if he stays home. Once the vineyard paperwork is finished, we won't have to pretend anymore. The room went quiet enough to hear my hallway clock ticking. I folded the page carefully, as if handling it roughly would sharpen the sting. I suppose I finally know what they think of me, I said. Audra shook her head. You know what Vanessa thinks. I'm not convinced Nathan believes all of it. Then she placed a second document in front of me, the purchase agreement for the vineyard. My signature was on it, but so was something I'd forgotten in the rush of the gift. The ownership line still read, Calloway Legacy Holdings, LLC. Not Nathan and Vanessa. For tax reasons, the final transfer hadn't gone through yet. Legally, the vineyard was still mine. Audra asked the question she already knew was coming. What do you want to do? I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to humiliate anyone. What I wanted was for them to understand that generosity isn't weakness, and respect isn't optional. So I told her, don't transfer the vineyard. No threats, no lawsuits. Just notify the venue that no authorization had been given for tomorrow's reception. The wedding could still happen anywhere they chose, They just weren't free to celebrate it on land that wasn't theirs. She typed. It was done. Outside, the sun dropped behind the vines, unchanged by any of it. I felt no satisfaction, only a bone-deep tiredness, and a text from an unknown number. Your son has no idea what's about to happen. I barely slept. At sunrise, I was back on the porch when Nathan finally called, and I finally answered. His voice cracked with panic. The venue had turned them away. A legal problem. Did I do this? I asked my attorney to delay the transfer, I said. So this is revenge. It's consequences. I heard Vanessa shouting behind him, blaming me. Then Nathan's voice changed. Quieter, younger. Dad, please, I need you. For a second, I wasn't talking to a 34-year-old groom. I was hearing the boy who used to crawl into my lap after nightmares. I almost gave in. Instead, I asked him the only question that mattered. Do you need me, or do you need my vineyard? He had no answer. That silence told me everything. By noon, the wedding planner herself called my landline, exhausted, asking if I'd really meant for any of this to happen. I told her no. I'd meant to keep a promise to myself never to reward disrespect. She was quiet a long moment, then said she didn't think I was the villain everyone imagined. Later, in town, an old harvest worker named Dale stopped me outside the grocery store. His father, he said, used to tell him that if someone's ashamed of the hand that fed them, they're probably not hungry enough yet. Strangers were offering me more grace than my own family had. That afternoon, 3 black SUVs pulled up to my gate, Vanessa's parents, Gerard and Irene. They'd learned on the way to the church that their daughter had written those emails herself. Irene apologized. Gerard, a proud man, looked genuinely shaken. I raised her better than this, he said. No father wants to hear that about his child. For the first time all day, I understood I wasn't the only parent in pain. Then a car door slammed, and Nathan was walking toward me, tuxedo jacket gone, tie loose, eyes red, looking nothing like a groom, and everything like a man who'd run out of places to go. Dad, can we talk? We stood by the old oak tree at the edge of the vineyard, the same tree where, at 7, he'd insisted we bury his mother's ring box because he was sure squirrels would steal it. He apologized, first for yesterday, then for everything. I asked him to be specific. He admitted he'd known all along that excluding me was wrong, and had backed down every time he thought about pushing back, telling himself it was just one day. When did you stop standing up for the people who stood up for you? I asked. He didn't know. I told him what Claire had said to me before she died, that she was afraid I'd confuse protecting him with rescuing him, and that one day he'd need to learn love isn't the same as endless agreement. He asked if I'd really meant to hand over the vineyard without conditions. I told him nobody spends $7 on a bluff. I wasn't buying loyalty. I was securing his future. Then he handed me his phone. 6 months of Vanessa's texts. Your dad makes every occasion about himself. My parents' friends will think we married down. Once the property paperwork clears, the pretending can stop. He'd known and defended her anyway, believing that was what a husband owed his wife. I told him it was, right up until standing by her meant turning his back on his father. Vanessa arrived moments later, still in her ruined wedding dress, mascara tracked down her face, calling the whole thing my doing, my pride. I told her plainly, no, they'd done this themselves. She turned to Nathan for backup, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, my son chose right instead of easy. My father didn't torch anything, he said. So you're choosing him? I'm choosing what's right. She asked what exactly they'd built together if it started with excluding his father. Nathan had no answer for that either, only sadness. I told her plainly that all I'd ever wanted was a seat in the front row, one dance, one photograph. That was the whole list, she said quietly, that she hadn't known. I told her she hadn't thought to ask. She left without another word, and Nathan watched the road long after her car was gone. Before he left that night, he asked if I'd have answered the door if he hadn't come himself. I told him honestly, I didn't know. He nodded, said he supposed he deserved that, then rolled down his window one more time. I love you. Those words had been missing for years. I love you too, son, I said, and he drove off, carrying something other than certainty. He was carrying hope. Monday, I went back to work, because vines don't care about heartbreak. Half the valley had their own version of what happened. Some painted me as cold, some as a fool played by lawyers. I let it go. People believe whatever confirms what they already think. Instead, I called Audra and told her I didn't want the vineyard sitting frozen inside a company shell. We built something new. Not a gift, but a family trust. Ownership would come to Nathan eventually, but only after he met real conditions: financial education, active work in the business, annual review by independent trustees. If it ever became his, it would be because he'd become a man fit to protect what came before him. 3 weeks later, Nathan called. Not about money, just breakfast. We sat in the same diner we'd visited every Saturday of his childhood, and for 3 hours we didn't talk about lawyers or weddings. We talked about his mother. I told him things about Claire he'd never known, how she once let an entire Thanksgiving turkey burn black because she was busy teaching the neighbor kids to make ornaments, how she'd dance barefoot in the kitchen whenever Tony Bennett came on the radio. He said he'd spent so long chasing the life he thought he was supposed to want that he'd lost track of the one his mother had hoped for him. A month later, he asked to walk the vineyard with me, and ownership never came up once. Near the old oak tree, he told me he'd started seeing a counselor, and that he'd realized most of his adult life had been a performance for other people, while the one person who'd respected him without conditions was the one he'd taken for granted. Vanessa and Nathan ended things quietly about 2 months after the wedding that never happened. No fight, no scene, just two people finally admitting their futures ran in different directions. I carry no anger toward her. It's too heavy a thing to haul around. I only hope she learns what my son did. That character outlasts every surface impression. The following spring, the vineyard hosted something better than any reception. We ran a charity harvest festival for veterans, teachers, and families, carrying burdens they never asked for. Nathan ran the whole event himself, shook every volunteer's hand, thanked every donor by name, and late in the afternoon I watched him quietly help an elderly veteran to a chair and bring him his lunch. No cameras, no applause, just kindness, offered because it was right, not because anyone was watching. That's when it hit me. The greatest thing I could ever leave my son wasn't a vineyard. It was another chance to become the man I'd always known he could be. So that's where Warren Calloway stands now. Not bitter, not broken, a little straighter than he was when this story began. It cost me years of quiet hurt and a son who drifted just far enough to feel like a stranger. But I believe the wound had to happen, because the only road back to him ran straight through it. There was no shortcut. If this story leaves you with anything, let it be this. When someone shows you they're ashamed of you, believe them. A joke at your expense is still a verdict. Don't sign away what you've built until you're certain the people receiving it have earned the right to carry it. And if you're ever handed a second chance with someone you love, don't waste it on punishment. Build the thing that should have been there all along.